Welcome to the season finale. On this lead up we're doing to how Nurse Letby got into trouble. You see, it's not about Lucy Letby. Like, it could have been any nurse's name. That's not what the story is about. It could have been Melanie Taylor. I can't even remember the names of the other nurses, because that is not what the story's about. Let's just have a recap. So, I recommend you watch Double Downers, maybe the one with the sausage dog, and JR and the Snake. What am I saying? Watch them all, but no, specifically those three. But I'll do a brief recap. So where are we? Ravi Jayaram and Steve Brewery are about to get into big trouble for their escapades with getting a nurse thrown off the ward by refusing to let her be on the ward. Obviously, they've not been doing ward rounds, and babies have been collapsing. Okay, and they're blaming the one of the nurses who happens to do the most overtime and work nights. So, the hospital take this further and say, you obviously can't, you've got no evidence about this, and the hospital, sorry, the nurse Lucy goes through this grievance procedure, rightly so, because obviously she's done nothing wrong other than a bit of overtime. By the way, it's going to be a long one, so get a cup of coffee, strap in, glass of wine, whatever you fancy. So JRM and Brewery were in trouble with HR, and they keep doubling down, and the hospital, rightly so, are having none of it. But just to cover their arse, well, JRM came up with this ridiculous theory about air embolism and got shot down even by one of his own cohorts, John Gibbs, about this air embolus, because it didn't make sense. It didn't fit any of the deaths, really. But him and Brewery are doubling down because they don't, because they're in trouble with HR. They don't want to get into more trouble. So instead, they want to keep pushing this. Maybe it's a case of folie à deux, and they actually do believe it. I don't know. Unlikely. But there's this sense that almost unconscious bias where one path you take is going to be beneficial for you and another path is not going to be beneficial to you, and naturally they will be led down that garden path that is beneficial to them, won't they? The same way we're talking about certain expert witnesses being funded by a certain side. Let's just say. So the hospital, rightly so, think, okay, we better just cover all the bases and get an outsider. I mean, obviously, Ravi, they've told Ravi if they feel there's been criminal activity, go to the police. That's what they've been told, and he's not done that really. Well, no, there's no really. He's not done that. But the hospital will say, okay, we'll better CYA, cover your ass, and they'll get an outsider in to do from London to do an independent a neonatologist and a pathologist to look at it specifically with air embolus in mind. But I presume they obviously can't tell the doctors who are doing the independent pathology exam that by the way, can you look for a murder? Because that would just be ridiculous. But they have said, can you look in case there's? Can you look for air embolus? Because there would be natural ways that perhaps air got into the tubes somehow. So they've asked, even though it's ridiculous, they thought, better do it anyway, just to shut him up. And they did that, and it came back. Negative. At autopsy, there was no evidence of air embolism, and all of the four babies that they looked at again, done with a pathologist and a neonatologist looked at again, all came back as death by natural causes, of course. So where are we? The hospital had a meeting with the police. Now the hospital, I've got no evidence that the hospital had ever told the police about JRM's ridiculous murder method of air embolus. I mean, how could you? Because you saw the last video, hopefully. So the hospital have gone to the police and said the consultants are, as far as we know, we suspected that the hospital said the consultants are concerned that a nurse has been on duty, yada yada yada, but not. We suspect that they didn't specifically mention air embolus, but the police were going to close the investigation because they're satisfied that the hospital done an internal review, all the deaths were natural causes, and the nurse in question had been doing a lot of overtime and were working with higher acuity babies, all the sensible stuff that, because the police were actually pretty sensible and said, yeah, nothing of interest, we're not going to investigate. By the way, we keep getting these emails from this Ravi bloke. We'll just go and see him on the 15th of May. 3 days later, we'll go and have one last meeting with him, just in case he's got something he wants to tell us, and for some reason hasn't told us in the emails. And so they they trot to see Ravi and Brewery, and we suspected that this, because the next day the police decided they're going to investigate, we suspected that this meeting was the one where Ravi pulled out this what he thought was a an ace in the hole of this murder method of air embolus, but the hospital are unaware that he's not holding an ace. He's holding a joker, because the hospital had already ruled out specifically this air embolus. So this was all just what we suspected. And I said, wouldn't it be great if we could be a fly on the wall at that meeting on the 15th of May? And my thanks to one of the fans who has said, indeed, that meeting is documented on the Thirlwall inquiry, and I couldn't find it. I thought it was, you're having a laugh. I couldn't find it because there's a couple of things on the Thirlwall inquiry, just the way that they date things. Like normally stuff's dated by number, like 13/05/2017 for something, or sorry, 12/05/2017 for something that happened on the 12th of May. And so naturally I put 15 for the 5th 2017 in. Nothing there. The format that they used to date it, for some reason they'd written May, a bit like when I'd found Dr. was it McPartland's this one also didn't have a date on it. It just said undated, but it's almost as if the juicy stuff is somewhat unindexed. But I haven't got my tinfoil hat on, but we'll let that slide. Okay, I couldn't find it. Someone found it. It's there. They've uploaded it. So here we go. We are now at that meeting with Steve Breary, Ravi Jayaram, Nigel Wenham, and he's taken his good old friend Paul Hughes with him. Let's hope the toilet's nearby. Did I mention Susie Holt? They brought some other woman with her. She's not very significant, I don't think. So here we go. Strap in. It's a bit long. I'm going to start from where they start talking because there's some introductions. Yada yada yada. Okay, let's start from here. Okay, Ravi Jayaram. He says, if you have concerns about a doctor, you would report to the GMC. Concerns about a nurse to the Nursing and Midwifery Council. If you have a wider issue like this, you escalate through the trust. It's regarded as whistleblowing if you go outside. We've taken advice from our medical defence unions to do everything within the trust and deal that route. Well, not really. If you also, what they've missed out is if you've got a concern about a child death, you go to the Child Death Oversight Panel. Susie Holt, one of the few times she chirps up. Guidance is available online from the BMA and GMC. Steve Breary. There are invited college reviews, like the one from September. That was service review. They did recommend a multi-service review. The case notes review by Dr. Horden did assess some cases. So this Dr. Horden was one of the. She was either the. Well, she was the pathologist then, I guess. Who done the independent case review on the 4 babies that specified no air embolism. This was not what the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health Review asked for. What happened was they've put in bold, one neonatologist, as if that's not good enough. It's not good enough that they just got a second opinion. They wanted a third, fourth, fifth. How many people have got to tell them that they're wrong? One neonatologist looked at cases notes. This was not multidisciplinary review that was suggested. Well, I mean, we could get Liz Hull with her art degree to tell you if you wanted. Or was that Judith? I can't remember. The trust can have a root cause analysis to invite professionals in to do a review of a whole case. These tend to be single case, not cohort reviews. CQC have a responsibility for all NHS organisations and private. As clinicians, very unusual for us to go direct. This would be more whistleblowing. We have not directly contacted the CQC. Advice from legal reps: exhaust all possibilities first. Ravi, the Jane Horden review specifically mentioned a forensic review. We cannot conduct that level of review. The fact is, these babies would not be the ones you would have expected at the point they collapse, and they did not respond physiologically to the treatment as expected. I mean, it's not all that statement there. There's nothing new. The hospital said that they said that to the police, and the police were still satisfied and ready to close the case. Okay, Steve Brewery. Okay, so he's put here in bold. He wants to understand more detail about their concerns. In other words, that's not enough. So now let's try and understand what's the problem. Steve Brewery. Of those 9 reviewed initially, 6 of the 9 collapsed between midnight and 4 a.m, which was highly unusual. Well, actually, if you do a quick Google, and I did it in my other video, that's not unusual. It was something like 75 to 80 or something % of sudden infant deaths happened between those hours. So that is about right, 6 out of 9. In fact, I'd probably expect it to be 7 out of 9. But maybe, I mean, I'll give Steve Brewery the benefit of the doubt, I'd say, and because he's only used to dealing with deaths of 2 or 3, then he perhaps wouldn't know that. Yeah, this is perhaps the only time they've looked at 10. One of the action was to review the period prior, and nothing was found. We'll share these reviewed. That review also noticed a significant number of collapses. Also noticed a significant number of collapses, so I don't know whether that means deaths or I don't know. Steve Brewery again. Following on from that thematic review, we discussed the nurse Lucy, but no action taken. I shared the report with Ian Harvey prior to the CQC inspection in February. At this time, the nurse had been put on day shifts for mentoring reasons. So they're not telling them. The nurse had been put on day shifts for mentoring reasons. They're not telling them that. They're not really telling them the whole story, there, are they? Like, who made them put her on day shifts? It's almost making it sound like just coincidentally. I don't know. Question. Confirm how many that the nurse has been present for. Steve Brewery. The nurse was present in all but one of the deaths. I take it they're talking about the 9 deaths there. So 8 out of 9, I don't know. Ravi. The staffing review has looked at the notes. This has not necessarily been picked up. What has not been looked at? This baby collapsed. Who was there? What were you doing at this time? As consultants, it is very rare that the consultants were present at the time of collapse. Well, let me tell you, as consultants, it was very rare that you were present at all. From what we hear, at the point of the collapse, the nurse was present at the time in close proximity. This has not happened to other staff. I can speak about one that, and here we go. Now, let me just remind you, only 6 months ago, so they've been given a heads up that they're going to close the case, but they're going to have one last meeting. Quick, we better come out with something. Just 6 months previously, Chris Green. So to avoid speculation, did you hear Chris Green to Ravi? To avoid speculation, did you hear any suggestion that Lucy had been deliberately harming babies? Ravi, no objective evidence to suggest this at all. The only association was Lucy's presence on the unit at the time. Anything else is speculation. And here he goes. Suddenly he's remembered. I can speak about one that did collapse but survived. 27 weeks, was stable, had breathing tube down, good ventilation, named nurse, i.e. nurse assigned to care for the baby during that particular shift, had gone out the nursery. I went back in, the baby's oxygen levels had dropped. First thing to do, disconnect baby from ventilator and bag. I noticed the breathing tube had been dislodged. The nurse, Letby, Lucy, was present at the time. Ravi. There is perception that we are on a campaign. This is not the case. Other consultants and junior doctors had come to the same view. Yeah, just bring... Oh, it's not me. It's all these. It's everyone. It got to the point that when the nurse was on duty, we feared something would happen. Ravi, we are not on a witch hunt. Do I need to say any more? It's interesting that he'd use those specific words. The very thing. We have concerns that this nurse was present in far too many occasions. Then Ravi provided an example of baby that was being treated for low blood sugars, very erratic pattern of sugar level which changed with shift pattern, no clinical explanation, consulted with Order Hay who agreed, was unable to explain. That's the one with the wavering glucose levels. Steve Burry, we've looked hard, we can't find any explanation. Okay, next, identify any specific evidence of any criminal or suspected criminal activity. Clarify some aspects regarding the pathology and causes of death. Question. 3 cases were certified by doctors on the wards. Why? Meaning 3 of the cases had listed, I'm guessing this is what it means, had listed the cause of death as a known cause of death, not even natural unknown, but cause of death known. Steve Berry. One baby, 29 weeks, felt that the baby displaying typical signs of NEC, I think, is that sepsis? Felt at the time this was not suspicious. The baby had abdominal X-ray an hour before death. There was no sign of NEC. It was necrotizing or something, maybe. The fact X-ray was normal is odd. As an isolated case, he would not have been considered suspicious, but assessed on the timeline, there are concerns. Questioned on the cause of deaths and pathology. Steve Brewery. This is what the post-mortem diagnosis is. Neo is so hard. In other words, hard on neonates, I guess. Jane I can't remember, Jane Horden review identified those 4 cases. We also reviewed these and another 4. We felt there was unexpected or unexplained cause of death. Steve Brewery, there are several babies with clear genetic diagnosis. In some cases, the post-mortem does not explain why the baby suddenly collapsed and died. Question: do you consult with the pathologist regarding the post-mortem findings? Outlined that this was not, so I guess this is Steve Brewery, outlined that this was not normal practice. Communication would take place between the pathologist and the coroner. Question: if third-party involvement, would you expect to see the same indicator? Steve Brewery, it's relatively easy to manipulate fluid, to administer drugs, and or to block an airway. Steve Brewery, there seems to be a theme with multiple births, triplets and twins, and the more stable infant being the one to collapse. The other, Sue, was it Holt? Was it Sue? Maybe Sarah, I can't remember. Ms. Holt. Case of baby INS. So INS means insignificant and sensitive. In other words, not a baby on the indictments, or if it was on the indictments, she was found not guilty. So, in other words, whatever comes out of her mouth here is already bollocks. Case of baby INS twins. One twin was on CPAP, but baby, another insignificant and I can't remember what S was. Sensitive, not needing any respiratory support, was the one that collapsed. Oh, blah blah blah. Ravi, concern we have is, could something be done deliberately to harm them? We don't know. I don't know if there's something, if this is something we just have to live with. We would rather there be some explanation. Our concern is, have enough questions been asked? Can we be satisfied that we have done all we can to confirm if there is something more going on? Nobody's talked to the junior doctors who have been involved. We appreciate that a lot of time has passed since these. We at the end of the day are responsible for patient safety on the ward. The buck stops with us. Oh my god, a vomit bag at the ready. I should have pre-warned. Steve Brewery. To put in perspective, consultant who joined us from crew, he has never experienced anything like this in 5 years as a consultant. Ravi JR, we all have concerns. Nothing significant changed over the years to explain the deaths, e.g. the changes in patient numbers, staffing do not explain the number of deaths or collapses. Well, he says that, but actually he wasn't he wasn't privy to seeing, I don't think he was privy to seeing a table with that was presented to the execs. Again, it's in, I'm going to do a lot of self-promo here. If you check out that video, Unexplained Increased Mortality, ? They present the fact that there were like 3 or 4 contributory factors that merged together, whilst not individually, whilst they didn't individually explain the higher deaths, there was like 3 or 4 contributory factors. But I mean, to be fair, I mean, Ravi wouldn't have been aware of that. Ravi, we do not dispute the findings from the RCPCH report, and it has made useful suggestions for our service, but feel these are background factors. The pathology report may attribute a likely cause of death, but this does not explain timing nor what caused the collapse that ultimately led to death. The pathology report may attribute a likely cause of death. Well, yeah, so what's more likely? That a nurse suddenly randomly started deleting them? Agreed, not challenging the pathology findings. So he's definitely not challenging the pathology findings of no evidence of air embolism. Okay, just make sure, and all natural causes. But the fact is, the causes of the collapse leading to death has not been identified. Again, so the doctors here are using these words about not being identified, but I'm presuming Wenham and Paul Hughes don't perhaps on understanding that not being identified is quite normal and still means natural causes, because there's no I don't know if Wenham is medically trained, probably not. Steve Brewery, survival rate for babies over 32 is nearly 100%. For 6 of our babies to have died who were over 32 weeks, to die is not right. Okay, next, review the key statements outlined in the report. The historic annual number of deaths on the neonatal unit in the hospital has been between 1 and 3. Yeah, from June 2015 there were 13 deaths in the 13 months. The probability of this increase in mortality occurring by chance alone is very low. Yeah, but not on a national scale. Many of the babies who died were born at gestations where death is statistically very unlikely. On the babies who died, most deteriorated unexpectedly without explanation at the time or subsequently. It's very unusual. All of this was covered before. It's very unusual not to see any clinical evidence of a baby becoming unwell. You might expect to see their heart beating faster or the level of oxygen in their blood changing. In some of these cases, there was no recovery to adequate resuscitation measures. For this to occur in such large number of babies is highly unusual and could be considered as suspicious. Well, not really. If you're looking at it could be, could not be. Steve Brewery did a thematic review in January 2016, looking at the 9 senior nursing staff from Liverpool Women's Hospital. Looking at theme trends, staffing was included in that report. Staffing on shift, designated nurse, consultant on duty, name of junior doctors present. Could not find a link with the consultant or doctors, but could with the nurses. Ravi. All collapses and deaths would involve wide range of professionals. Wenham. At what point was concerns raised? Steve Brewery. From December 2016, I guess, that I raised some concerns. The first discussion took place in June 2015 when we had 3 deaths within a few weeks. This was highly unusual. We met with Ian Harvey and head of risk at the time. We reviewed all these cases, could not identify any issues regarding clinical practice. At the time, the unit manager noticed that Lucy Letby, the nurse, was present at all 3, but not the attending. She was on shift, but she was not the designated carer for all 3 of the babies. That was the first conversation. So, again, they're being very, very selective with their statements. All 3 reported to coroner and had post-mortems. Yeah. And then what? They came back as natural death. Natural. Ravi was clinician for redacted. He attended inquest, cause of death unascertained. Steve Brewery, redacted, collapsed unexpectedly and died. His twin, redacted, child A and child B, collapsed but recovered. This was unexpected and unusual. Now looking back, we think this was suspicious. She had an unusual rash. Now I hope they're not talking about child A, because like we said, like in the trial, looking interesting is, so they've used the words now looking back. Now looking back, we think this was suspicious. She had an unusual rash. Just remember, so child A, in court, and Ravi Jayaram, in his first interview with the police in July, the doctor spoke on this bright pinkness of patches against the bluey grey background. I think we're talking about the lead sign, the rash, on child A, the court heard. Mr. Myers asked, "You didn't make that description in your notes at the time?" "No," said the consultant. The barrister said, "Or in your statement to the coroner?" "No," he repeated. So, like I say, it wasn't. If it's child A that they're talking about, that wasn't in the notes. So it's possible he's made it up again. To be fair, there is a phenomenon called like false memory syndrome, and I mean I've had it to me on this case even when I was looking up a document and I on something on Hummingbird, and I was sure it gave one figure, and then I was adamant in my mind that it gave one figure, and then I looked at it, I thought, have they changed? They must have changed this, and I looked it up on Wayback Machine, which is something that gives a cache, and sure enough, it had the same original. It had the same figure. Basically, I was wrong, and it was a false memory. So it could be. I'm sort of playing devil's advocate here. It could be that they're under a lot of stress, and they've been possibly having these thoughts, and then they've looked up a symptom. It's a bit like what Victor Meldrew used to do when he got his wife wouldn't let him look at the medical book, because every time he looked up his disease or something, he suddenly started feeling the symptoms. But okay, let's move on. Steve Bree, baby redacted, improved after intervention, being brought into unit and started on treatment, then collapsed and died on day redacted. All blood markers did not indicate worsening infection. Post-mortem still spots inflammation in the lungs, but this does not explain the improvement in the baby's health, and then collapse. Explain collapse. Steve Brewery, baby do not have cardiac arrest like adults do. Collapse on unit would be inadequate breathing. Baby stopped to breathe, may stop breathing, dropped oxygen levels. Breathing stops and oxygen level for period. Heart slows down. This requires cardiac massage. These babies had apnea, stopped breathing. Increased number result in desaturation. These babies just stopped out of the blue. How do we know that? Ravi, they are on monitors. However, monitors don't keep digital record of numbers. Nurses document observations from monitors hourly on observation charts. Steve, most babies were at gestation would not expect these sort of things happening. Same again. Ravi, these babies simply did not respond as expected. Interventions did not result in expected results, just more of the same, yada yada. The baby redacted. Interventions were put in place. There was evidenced electrical activity of the heart, but he did not have output. blah blah blah. Ms. Holt, there is a big difference adult and neonatal practice. With intervention, we would expect to see some response, and statistics support this. What was the thought process with no response? Ravi, in a one-off, there could be explanation. Steve, we would expect the post-mortem to find evidence to support cause of death. Well, they did. The pick-up rate from pathology has not informed us as to why the babies have collapsed. Ravi, we accept in medicine some uncertainty. We accept cognitive bias, but we can't see an explanation. Is it people, practice, building, accommodation? It's a big leap of faith to suggest these all lined up and led to the deaths. All of these factors, acuity on unit, medical and nursing staff levels, are there in common to other neonatal units in the country. Steve Brewery, post-mortem redacted was done urgently. Ravi, if any concerns, we would escalate to the coroner, would discuss and agree a process. Steve, all neonatal deaths are discussed with the coroner. Okay, there is an association with a member of staff who was present during the majority of instances when the babies unexpectedly deteriorated. When this member of staff was put onto day shifts for 3 months, no sudden collapses occurred during the night. Previous to this change in her work pattern, in 6 out of 9 deaths, the arrest occurred between midnight and 4 a.m. when this member of staff was no longer working on the unit, July 2016 to present. There have been no neonatal deaths on the unit and no unexpected or unexplained sudden deteriorations. Well, yeah, because it was downgraded. This member of staff was present at the unit during the deterioration of the children who died, and it lists them all. The gestation at birth of the babies who died was between 27 weeks and 40 weeks. 6 babies were above 32 weeks gestation. The redesignation of the unit from July only permitted to care for babies 32 weeks above 32 weeks gestation. Cannot therefore be the only reason why there have been no deaths or sudden unexplained deteriorations of babies on the unit since July 2016. Well, I think there were deaths since July 2016. An external neonatologist from London has identified 4, child A, I, O and P, who require further forensic review. So they're saying that's their interpretation of the report. Further, but we've seen the summary of the report, and it basically agreed with. I mean, for child, okay, require further forensic review. Child A, I, O, and P. So A, they said it remains unascertained. Doesn't really say that it requires further forensic review. They didn't. It's not even unexplained. It was. We are in agreement that the cause of death is hypoxic ischemic damage of brain and chronic lung disease of prematurity due to extreme prematurity. Oh, again, not even unascertained. Oh no, there we go. Oh no, yeah. Oh no, the initial collapse remains unexplained, but not the death. P. They were just saying there was no toxicology report done. So, I mean, that's quite loose language he's used there. You're in a room with Ravi, JR, Steve Brewery, and their sidekick Ms. Holt, all spinning the same yarn to you, and there's no representative from the hospital who's going to say, by the way, they specifically looked for your ridiculous air embolism. Okay, where did I get to? who furthers her report. A consensus between 3 hospital paediatricians and an external neonatologist from the Liverpool Women's Hospital have identified a further 4 child CDINSIS for whom the cause of death is still unexplained. Here we go. An unexplained rash was observed for at least 3 babies. I hope you don't mean baby A. This was initially thought to be due to infection. Again, just remember, if they're talking about Lee's sign, even if that would be 10% of that would be 10% of them. So if you're going to talk about statistics, this was initially thought to be due to infection by the clinical teams. However, the rashes resolved spontaneously despite the babies being very ill. This is highly unusual and may indicate a possible unnatural cause of death. Well, that's strange because they're not talking about murder, are they? Because that's not what the pathologist said. Is this Steve Brewery talking? Ravi did some reading and found that situation called air embolism. Small amounts of free air in circulation can obstruct the flow of blood into the lungs. Free oxygen can be picked up. There is a rash associated with these diagnoses. So, I mean, the fact that Wenham's not saying anything about it being ruled out tells you that the hospital haven't told them that they ruled this out. Where did I get to? I've just pressed the button. Okay, there was a rash. Ms. Holt explained that we associated infection with rashes. Explained that we associated infection with these rashes. This was not the case here. Not a recognisable rash outside these collection of babies. Air embolism can happen deliberately or accidentally. For example, cannula administration of drugs. What could happen? There could be an error in how the cannula is managed. Babies insignificant. Child D and 1 survived. Child B. Ravi. My understanding is that unless the post-mortem is done very soon, there will not be any evidence on the post-mortem. Closing comments. Ravi. Vomit bags at the ready. We are used to dealing with uncertainty. This is what we do. We have said we want enough done to rule out foul play. Ian Harvey has suggested getting another neonatal review. Jane Horden refers to forensics, but what this means. Steve Brewery. We were very worried. The triplets, twins who died, there was no explanation. She was the named nurse. Other nurses have gone off work with stress. She didn't. Duty exec was happy for nurse to remain on duty at the time. When expressed our concerns, we don't think the execs have understood our concerns. In January, we met with the chief exec, all 7 of us. We were told we have spoken to the family. Don't cross the line. We are dealing with it. Every paediatrician were worried about her going back to work, and none of us were happy with her returning back to work. We don't feel this is acceptable. This has not been investigated properly. Ravi. I don't want the obvious fractious relationship between us and the execs. This is not why we want you here. We are not sure the process. Reports have asked the right questions. We want to exclude. Is there anyone who is deliberately harming these babies? At a meeting in Jan, exec read out a letter from the nurse that stated she was exonerated by reviews to date. Well, she was. Ravi. We fully understand the impact of investigation, damaging to the trust, the neonatal unit and staff, and the impact on the families and the babies. At the end of it, you may ask, what was the point? Speaking for myself, We are not comfortable as worried about the safety of our patients. No mention of the fact that if you don't go ahead with this investigation, me and Steve are definitely going to get in real big trouble with HR about a pending grievance process against us. No mention of that in there. So, now we know that our suspicions were confirmed. Absolutely everything we thought that went on during this meeting went on, although I didn't know he would throw in the old witnessed doing nothing whilst the baby's oxygen levels had dropped. I didn't think he would throw that in there, but now we know that's when he threw that one in, and that's why they opened the investigation. The following day they decided we'll go ahead and investigate. So what the problem is, the hospital XX are to blame here, because they obviously haven't told the police about them instructing, like we suspected, just as we suspected. They haven't told the police that when they instructed an independent pathologist and neonatologist to do the review, that they gave them instructions to specifically look for this air embolus. Otherwise, if Wenham knew about it and Paul Hughes, if Paul Hughes knew about it, he would have mentioned, they ruled that out. The hospital obviously didn't, like we suspected, didn't mention air embolus to the police. And now Ravi's drawn this ace in the hole that's actually a joker. And I wonder if even now, even after they open the investigation, they even know that Ravi pulled this air embolus card out again. And obviously the hospital can't say, by the way, we ruled it out, because they're going to look like fools. Just as we suspected. So the story is nothing to do with it. It could have been. It's got nothing to do with the nurse. It's all about Ravi and Breary's folie à deux.